أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله. Alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah Azza wa Jal, we have come now to verse number 41 of Surah al-Mā'idah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الرسول لا يحزنك الذين يسارعون في الكفر من الذين قالوا آمنا بأفواههم ولم تؤمن قلوبهم ومن الذين هادوا سماعون للكذب سماعون لقوم آخرين لم يأتوك يحرفون الكلم من بعد مواضعه يقولون إن أوتيتم هذا فخذوه وإن لم تؤتوه فاحذروا ومن يرد الله فتنته فلن تملك له من الله شيئا أولئك الذين لم يرد الله أن يطهر قلوبهم لهم في الدنيا خزي ولهم في الآخرة عذاب عظيم. صدق الله العظيم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this verse, O Messenger, Ya ayyuhar Rasul. The very first command here, the person being addressed is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in a very direct manner. And he's being told, لا يحزنك الذين يسارعون في الكفر من الذين قالوا آمنا بأفواههم ولم تؤمن قلوبهم ومن الذين هادوا. He says, O Messenger, do not let them grieve you, those who hasten into disbelief of those who say, we believe with their mouths, but their hearts don't believe. And from amongst the Jews. They are the avid listeners to falsehood, listening to other people who have not come to you. They distort the words beyond their usages, saying, if you are given this, take this, but if you're not given this, then beware. And we'll continue on with the verse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly addressing the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, saying, don't let them grieve you. Don't let those people who are saying that they're Muslim, but inside their hearts they're not truly believers, don't let them sadden you. You know, one of the things that is really amazing about this is that you have a sense of the emotion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this verse. You see, many of us, when we read these verses, we go through it as if, it's another verse. But here, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasallam is directly being told, don't let them grieve you. You don't have this huzn, right? This huzn is almost like this deep sorrow and grief, to the point almost where you can't do anything because you're so sad. Right? Depression, if you will. And he's being told, don't do that. So what does that tell you? That the Prophet ﷺ, he was worried about people. He was worried about their iman. And he allowed it. He even became saddened that these people, they're saying that they believe, but they don't actually believe. How can he change that? What can he do? And this used to affect heavily on the heart of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because these were his people, brothers and sisters. That's what I think we fail to understand. Today we compartmentalize them and say, oh, those were the kafirin. Those were the kuffar. Those were the hypocrites. Those were terrible people. But the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he lived with these people. He saw them every day. He was with them. And he didn't want them to go to hellfire. He wanted them to go to Jannah. And so it pained him when they didn't accept the message. It pained him when they would say things with their tongue that they didn't actually mean. This was the akhlaq and the khuluq of our Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And I think, brothers and sisters, there's a big lesson in that for us. Because many of us, we don't feel as if people out there are our people. We don't feel as if the members in our community or our neighborhoods or our workplaces or our colleagues, we don't feel like they're our people. We feel like, oh, those are just other people. Do we have the same kind of love and care for them? Do we have the same sense of grief that could come to us because they're not Muslim? Right? It's a point of reflection for us around how the Prophet ﷺ was with his community and how you and I might be with our communities. Because Allah is directly telling him here, don't let them grieve you. We know what they're doing to you. They're telling you that they're يُسَارِعُونَ إِلَى الْكُفْرِ. They're rushing towards disbelief. They're rushing towards disbelief, and they're saying, we believe, آمَنَّا. They're saying, we believe, but in their hearts, with their mouths, but while their hearts don't believe. They have no belief in here. And Allah is comforting the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's telling him, look, we know what your situation is, but don't let those people bother you. Don't let them bother you. While their hearts believe not, and those who are Jews. So some of the Mufassirin, they mentioned here about this, that this verse could be referring to both the hypocrites who were in Medina and also the Jewish tribes. Others, however, said that this was a reference to some of the Jews who had converted, quote unquote, to Islam, and that they didn't actually convert, but they were still amongst the hypocrites. So there's some difference of opinion about whether this is a verse directly about the munafiqeen and the Bani Israel, or the Jews at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, Banu Qurayza and Banu Nadir in particular, or if it's from amongst them, if there were people who said with their mouths, La ilaha illallah, but then they didn't actually believe it. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, these are the ones who listen to the lies to others, who listen to lies, and to others who have not come to you. They distort the meanings of words. They are listening to lies. Now, of course, there's some, what they are listening to each other, and they're trying to make fun of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They're trying to drive him away. Right? Now, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says is, they distort the meanings of words. This is very interesting here, because the word, they literally, what it's in Arabic, it says here, يُحَرِّفُونَ الْكَلِمَ مِنَ الْبَعْدِ مَوْضِئِهِ. So it says here that يُحَرِّفُونَ is actually to change one word in place of another. To change one word, like to have a word in a part of a sentence and to change it and make it part of something else. There's a difference of opinion about what came about here, where this comes from. But one of the opinions is that there were there were people that had committed adultery in the Jewish tribes that came to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ for a ruling. They committed adultery and they came for a ruling. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he actually asked, what is the ruling according to your books? According to your books, what is the ruling? Right? And it was told that they gave him different opinions about what the rulings were. Now the Prophet, it was said at that time that Jibreel alayhi salam had already revealed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that in their scriptures, stoning is the punishment for adultery. So he already knew that what the right answer was. But they were going around trying to change the opinion, saying, no, this is it, and this is it, and this is it, and this is it. Eventually they found a man by the name of Ibn Surya, who was then brought, and he asked them, what do you think about his opinion of the Jewish scriptures? They said he is the most knowledgeable amongst us. And so then the Prophet ﷺ directly asked him, as the story went, what is the ruling? And he basically kind of cornered him to a point where the man couldn't lie. And he said, if it were any other situation, I would not tell you what the real ruling is. The real ruling is to be stoned. He said, why then are there so many opinions here? And he said, well, it used to be that amongst the princes of the elite, the royalty, there was somebody who committed adultery. And because he was amongst the princely people, we didn't punish him. We kind of hid it. But then a commoner came and he committed adultery. And so people were saying, well, we need to punish him. They said, well, how can you punish him if the prince hasn't been punished? Right? How can you go again? That means that the law is not being applied equally. And so there was a big debate amongst those about what happened, what they should do. And eventually it was settled that neither of them, they should just get some light punishment. Some beating, some whipping, something like that, some light punishment. And he said that eventually over time, this became the going ruling, that people weren't really punished for their sins in the way that the scriptures asked for. And that's what the Mufassirin say is a reference to يُحَرِّفُونَ الْكَلِمَةِ, that they changed the words of God. They changed it. They changed the rulings on their own, right? Because they didn't want to punish a prince or punish somebody that they honored or punish others. And eventually that was what was rolled down. And yet here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us an example that they are the ones who are changing the meaning. They distort the meanings of the word. And they say, if you are given this, then take it. But if you're not given this, then beware. Right? They're the ones that are changing it. In other words, the change does not come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Allah can take a ruling and change it. He can say, this is the ruling, and then this is now the new ruling. Mankind is not allowed to do that. I can't sit here in front of you and tell you, actually, guys, there's 7 prayers, not 5. It's not allowed. Right? That is a hukum from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Mankind can't change those rulings. And yet that's what was being done in the previous generation of the Jews. And so by the time Banu Nadir, Banu Qurayza, and these different Jewish tribes had come and established themselves, they had kind of a watered down version of what were the original rulings that were given to them. And also, interestingly enough, the Mufassirin mention here about the rulings should not be misapplied just because somebody is part of a royal class. Just because there's some type of, what do they call it here? They call it diplomatic immunity. Right? People sometimes they're diplomats from other countries, they have immunity from the laws of this country. Right? There's no such thing in Islam from that perspective. Whether you're part of the elite class or the royalty you don't have immunity from the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has to be equally applied. And that's why even during the time of Umar ibn Khattab and the Khulafa Rashidin, there were non-Muslims that would come and ask for judgment because they knew that whatever the Khalifa says at this time, even if a Muslim is the transgressor, they will give the punishment to the Muslim. Right? That it doesn't matter. There was a sense of justice amongst people, equality amongst people in that sense, in terms of what a person's rights were. Very important that they didn't give a caste system. There was no class system that said, hey, this person is above the law. They don't have to worry about it. Right? This is very clear. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, these people, they thought there were some that were going to be above the law. And that wasn't going to be... that was not going to be pure for them. For whomever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala desires that he be tried, you have no power to avail him against Allah. Again, comforting the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, saying, look, if these people, if they have this nifaq, if they have this type of hypocrisy in their hearts, nothing you do is going to change that. You can give da'wah, you can continue to educate them, but their hearts are hardened. Their hearts are hardened, and it will not avail them. And it will not avail them against Allah either. In other words, you may want them not to be punished. You may want for them to be saved. But if they have this hypocrisy in their hearts, they will be punished, regardless of what you want. Regardless of what you want. But he for whom Allah intends fitna, never will you possess the power for him to do anything against Allah. Those are the ones for whom Allah does not intend to purify their hearts. For them in this world is a disgrace, and for them in the hereafter is a great punishment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, now I want to be very clear. He does not intend to purify these people. Why? Because they are not sincere in their turning to Allah. If they were sincere, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would accept that repentance. He would accept that tawbah. He would accept them coming to him. But they're not being sincere. They're hiding in their hearts what they actually desire. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, there is no purification for those people. If you want it yourself, we will purify you. But if you're going to be stubborn or arrogant and think that you can pull a fast one on God, Allah has no intention of having you be purified. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, theirs is disgrace in this world. And in the hereafter they will have a punishment. They'll be disgraced in this world and in the next world. They will never find a place to fit in, even in this world. They'll try and play like they're with the Muslims because they're hypocrites, but they're not with them. They're driven away from them. And more importantly, their punishment is great in the hereafter. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from being those people. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala relieve us of any punishment. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from the punishment of the hellfire. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِوَالِدِينَ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَوْمَ يَقُومُ الْحِسَابُ رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَا بِالْإِيمَانِ ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبارك وسلموا تسليما كثيرا